Okay, students, today we're going to be doing some reading practice. So the first story, you can stop the video and read it by yourself, or you can read it with me. My past. When I was young, I lived in Las Vegas. I lived in Las Vegas for 18 years. I lived with my mother and father. My mom is from Honduras. My father is from the US. When I was 20 years old, I moved to Salt Lake City to go to school. I worked 2 jobs while I was going to school. It was hard work. It paid off. I am glad that I decided to go to school. So, some of the questions for this reading. One is, where did they live? Now, the reason that the question says they is because in the story, it only says I. It doesn't say who it is that's talking. It only says I, right? So we don't know what their name is. We don't know if they are go by he or she, or what they like to go by. So that's why in the questions it says they. So where did they live? So in the story, it says, I lived in Las Vegas. So since it's past tense, right? It says lived, and the question is asking, where did they live? That says did. Did is past tense. So we know that the answer to this question is they lived in Las Vegas. That's where they used to live. Now, the next question is, who did they live with? And it says that they lived, past tense, lived, with my mother and father. So that's the answer to the next one. Who did they live with? They lived with their mother and father. How many jobs did they have while they went to school? So right about here it says, I worked 2 jobs while I was going to school. So in the past, because it's ed, right? I worked 2 jobs. So that means they used to work 2 jobs while they went to school. Oh, sorry, that one went kind of ski-wompy. So that's the answer, is they worked 2 jobs while they went to school. So something about some of this that you might not understand. So when somebody says the phrase or the words, it paid off, or that paid off, it means that whatever they did before was it was a good idea, or it was something that they put a lot of money or a lot of time into, and it helped them in the future. So that's what it means when somebody says in English, oh, that paid off. So if you put a lot of money into repairing your car or fixing your car, and you were able to drive it to visit your family in another state like California or something, you could say, oh, well, that paid off. All of the money that you put into it was good and it was helpful. So that's what it means when somebody says it paid off in English. All right, this next one is called Mark's Present. Now, when it says Mark's present can mean a time. Like, we know that present means right now in the moment. But present can also mean like a gift, something that you give somebody. For this story, present means it means the time, what's happening right now, in the moment. Mark works for the National Guard at Fort Douglas. He is training to be a mechanic. He lives with his wife and daughter in Murray. Mark's wife's name is Susie. They have a daughter named Crystal. She will be 1 in August. Mark and Susie are planning a birthday party for their daughter. They want the party to be special. So, let me teach you some stuff real quickly. So, when there's an apostrophe, this little mark right here, and there's an S, we know that sometimes that can mean that it's a contraction. But when you have somebody's name or something, and then you have this apostrophe S, it means that it's theirs, like they own it, or it is related to them, meaning it is connected to them. So that's why when it says Mark's wife's name, the reason it says Mark's is because it's his wife, and the reason it says wife's name is because it's her name. So that's what that means. In English, when people talk about the ages of people, we don't always say 1 year old or 2 years old when we talk about age. Sometimes people say, when they're talking about age, they'll say, oh, she is 1 or she will be 1, meaning they will be 1 year old, or I will be 26 years old in March. That means in the future, I am going to be, 26 years old, but you could just say, I will be 26, and people know in English that you're talking about your age. So that's some of the stuff that might be a little bit confusing. So the first question, where does Mark work? So let's find where Mark works. So, look, right at the beginning it says Mark works. That's what we're looking for. Mark works for the National Guard at Fort Douglas. So that's the answer. Mark works for the National Guard at Fort Douglas. That's where he works. Susie, or who is Susie? So let's look. So we're going to look for the name Susie, and it looks like it's right here. So we're going to look at the sentence, Mark's wife's name is Susie. So we know that Susie is Mark's wife. That's who he's married to. So that's who Susie is. How old is Mark's daughter? So we know that he has a daughter named Crystal, right? But we need to know how old she is. So let's look and see. She will be 1 in August. So that means his daughter is 1 year old, or 1 year old. When you only have one of something, you don't need to put an S at the end. So if they're 1 year old, you don't need to say 1 years old. You only say years old when it's more than one, because it's 1 or 2. It's plural. It's more than 1. How many children does Mark have? Well, in the story, it says that they have a daughter named Crystal, but it doesn't say anything else about any other kids. It also says that he lives with his wife and daughter. So that means Mark only has one child. He only has one child. He only has one daughter, and her name is Crystal. And she is going to be, in the future, 1 in August. This next story is called My Mom's Future. So you'll see again, it has the little line that is above the words. We call this an apostrophe and the S. That means that it's whatever comes after it belongs to or is a part of this person or thing. So it's my mom's future. So it's the mom's future. My mom is a great person. Her name is Angela. She worked very hard to make sure we had everything we needed. She never finished school. She is planning to go to nursing school. She is going to attend nursing school in the fall. She will work for the University of Utah Hospital. When she finishes nursing school, she will be 45. So, the first question is, what will Angela do? So in this story, what will, in the future, Angela do? The question isn't asking what did she do, not in the past, not what is she doing right now. It's talking about the future. What will she do? So we know that Angela, who's the mom, worked really hard but never finished school. So that was the past. It says she is planning, ing, planning, is planning to go to nursing school. She is going to attend nursing school in the fall. So we know that this is in the present tense, right? The present continuous. She is planning. But remember when we talked about the future tense and how when you're using the present continuous, but you're using it to talk about something that will happen in the future, it isn't happening right now, we can use it to talk about the future. So we know that in the future, Angela will go to nursing school. Where will she work? So in the future, where will she work? This sentence says, she will work for the University of Utah Hospital. Sorry that gets on the words, but she will work for the University of Utah Hospital. So that's the answer. How old will she be when she graduates? So let's look and see. So the word graduates, you'll see that the word graduate is not anywhere in the story. Graduate means to finish something for school. Like when somebody finishes high school, and that means that they graduate. It means that they did everything that they needed to do. They did all of their classwork, they did all of their assignments so that they can have a degree, or they can have, people call it a certificate. That's what lets you have certain jobs, is a degree or a certificate. Like to be a CNA or a nurse, you need to have a certificate or a degree. So graduate means just to finish the school. So it says that when she finishes nursing school, she will be 45. So she will be 45 years old. Just some words that you might not know. Attend. When it says she is going to attend nursing school, it just means that she is going to go to nursing school. She is going to take classes at nursing school. That's what attend means. Okay, so this next reading is from last week. There is not a curfew anymore in Salt Lake City, But I wanted to read through this to just practice to make sure that if it does happen again, or if it happens sometime in the future, you'll know what it means. So this one is called Salt Lake City curfew. The word curfew in English doesn't always mean city stuff. Parents have curfews for their kids sometimes. Curfew just means that you need to be not outside and in your house at a certain time. So when I was younger, when I was in high school, when I was a teenager, my curfew was 11:30. I always had to make sure that when I went out on Friday night to be with friends, I had to be inside my house at 11:30. Or sometimes people say by 11:30. When somebody says you need to, be inside by or have this done by, it means that at that time or on that day, you need to have everything turned in, or you need to make sure you are there. That's what it just means. So curfew is just being inside your house or wherever you need to be at a specific time. So you can pause the video and read by yourself, or you can read with me. Salt Lake City has issued a week-long nighttime curfew. The curfew is in effect from June 1st to June 8th, from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. During this time, gathering in public places and traveling through the city is prohibited. Exceptions: work, police, fire, attending religious services, obtaining food, patronizing private businesses, the airport, and medical care. So let's talk about some of the words that are in this. So first off, we've seen this word before, issued. Issued means to give, right? So if you're issued a new driver's license, that means you are given. Somebody gives you a new driver's license. So when it says that they've issued something, it means that something is now being given, or you're being told to do something. Salt Lake City has issued a week-long. Week-long sounds like just what it's written. It's a week, and it's a week-long, meaning this is happening for a whole week. It's as long as a week. So that's what week-long means. Nighttime curfew. We know what curfew means. The curfew is in effect. Effect means to happen or to start. For this, that's what it means for this. It means that the curfew is going to start, or the curfew is going to happen from June 1st. And remember this little thing right here, this little line, when it comes in between numbers or days or something, it means, or letters, it means to, or through. June 1st through June 8th. It means that from June 1st to June 2nd, June 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, that means there is going to be a curfew. From 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. So again, this little line means the same thing as this word right here. It just means every number, when it says to or through, it means that anything in between those two numbers or those days, everything in between it is a part of it. So it's not at 8 o'clock p.m. and 6 o'clock a.m. in the morning that the curfew is happening. It's everything in between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., so pretty much all night. During this time, gathering, the word gathering means come together. It means people all coming together or going someplace together. That's what gathering means. In public places, public just means a place that is owned by the, usually public just means it's owned by the city, or it's a place where people can be, and it's not somebody's house. It's not private property. It's not a place that belongs to anybody specifically or anybody in particular. It is something, it's a place, so a park is a public place. The street is a public place. I'm trying to think of other public places. So mostly parks and streets are public places. It's places that you can be really without permission. That's what public means. And traveling through the city is prohibited. So traveling, it's the continuous verb of travel, meaning you're going from one place to another place. You can travel to California. That means that you're going from Utah to California. That's travel. Or anytime you're going from one place to another, that's called travel. And when you're doing it, when it's continuous, we call it traveling. If you're traveling, meaning you're in the middle of or still doing, going from one place to another place. Through the city is prohibited. Prohibited is a fancy word in English for not allowed. You cannot do it. That's what prohibited means. It just means you cannot do it. You cannot do it. So this sentence is saying that from this date, June 1st, and everything in between that date to June 8th, from 8 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning, everything in between that, you are not allowed to gather in public places and travel through the city. It's not allowed. That's what it means by prohibited. Now, this word exceptions. Now, this sentence is telling us that there are certain things that you are not allowed to do. When somebody says exception or exceptions, it means the people or the things that you can do even though it's being said that you're not allowed to do this. Exceptions means it means that these people don't have to follow the same rules. That's what exception means, right? So an example of this would be if I ordered something from a store and I came back and their return policy is like 30 days and I bring it back 60 days later and I say, can I return this? And they say, no, it's been 30 days. That's past the return policy. But we will make an exception. It means that they will let me or they will let people do something even though the rules tell them not to. So the exceptions are for work, meaning if you're going to work, it's okay to be in public places or traveling through the city. Police officers, fire, people can be in public places or so basically they can be doing their jobs. So basically it's saying that if you are going to work or if you work for the police or the fire department, or if you're attending, meaning going to religious services, it means if you're going to church or if you're going to something at your church like an activity, or if you're going for like a prayer or something, you can go to those things. So that means even though they're saying you're not allowed to gather in public places or travel through the city, anybody who's working or going to religious services or obtaining food. Obtaining is a fancy word for get. Are you getting food? You can get food. That's what it's saying, is you can get food if you need it. Patronizing, that's another fancy English word. Patronizing, you'll see that there's a little ing at the end. Patronizing just means you're going to something and you're paying for something. So when it says patronizing private businesses, it means if you go into a store and you're shopping, you are a patron of the store. It means you are there to buy something or you're there to get something. That's what patronizing private businesses mean. The airport and medical care. So this is a list. All of these things are lists of things that you can do that are separate. So these are all the exceptions, and they're all separated by these little lines called commas, right? We learned about those before. These are what separate words from each other. So patronizing private businesses is separate, the airport is separate, and medical care. So it means that nobody is allowed to gather in public places or travel through the city. But if you're going to work, if you're doing something that's religious, if you're buying food at the grocery store or at a restaurant, if you're going to a store to buy something, you can. If you're going to the airport, if you're going to travel, you can. Or if you are going to go to the doctors, or if you need to go to the hospital, that is all allowed. And it's this, it's important to understand when these kinds of announcements happen, because it helps you to know, am I allowed to do this? Can I do this? And it helps you to not be so confused when stuff like this happens. So, because it can be really confusing if you don't understand everything that's being said. So the main things to remember is, if you don't understand a certain word, you should look up and see if you can translate it into your native language. The other thing is, whenever you see dates, like the certain days or times, like right here, those are what you need to pay attention to, because those are what are going to tell you when and where certain things can happen. So the questions for this: when does curfew start? So the curfew starts at 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. and it starts on June 1st. Now, this was a week ago, but if it was like last week and this came out, it would mean that from June 1st to June 8th, everything in between that, and every day of those dates between 8 p.m., 8 at night, to 6 o'clock in the morning, that's when the curfew is. And that means that gathering in public places and traveling through the city is not allowed. And the exceptions, when you see this word exceptions, it means everything after that is the things that you can do, or the people who don't need to follow this rule. So that's what that means. Who can be out past curfew? So we talked a lot about this. People who are working, if you're going because of a religious or something for your church, or the group that you participate with, that is about spiritual things, buying food, going to a store and shopping, if you're going to the airport, if you're getting help at the hospital or help from a doctor, that's the people who can be out past the curfew. Can I be with my friends in a park? So this is a good question. Can I be with my friends in a park? And the short answer to this is no, you can't be in a park with your friends. But you could be in a park with your friends if you were there at, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's not between 8 at night or 6 in the morning. But if you wanted to go to the park at 8:30 p.m. or 8:30 at night, you wouldn't be allowed to hang out with your friends. But if you wanted to on June 9th at 8:30, you could, because the curfew ends on June 8th. So that's what you need to pay attention to with when announcements like this happen, when these kinds of things happen. So this one's really long. If you're tired of reading, that's okay. You don't need to finish this one. This is a news article that I took from a local newspaper. And it's about the protests that have been happening. And I'm not going to ask any questions about this. This is just going to be some practice reading, and it's going to be some practice with vocabulary. So we'll start reading it. I'll read it slow. If I'm reading too slow, you can pause it and read it, on your own. So a crowd nearing 500 people. Here, let me change my little pointer so you can see what word I'm reading. A crowd nearing 500 people marched down State Street in Salt Lake City Monday evening, the latest episode in nearly a week of protests, both nationwide and across the Beehive State. The demonstrations have decried police brutality and the deaths of George Floyd in Minnesota, Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, and Bernardo Palacios Carbajal in Salt Lake City. The crowd chanted, "This is what democracy looks like," and "Black Lives Matter," before kneeling for several minutes at each intersection, blocking traffic both ways. A caravan of honking cars followed with passengers leaning out of the window, waving signs and holding their fists in the air. The crowd erupted as a particularly enthusiastic Utah Transit Authority bus driver passed, laying on the horn and pumping her fist through the window. Police escorted the crowd as they walked through downtown Salt Lake, blocking off each intersection as the protesters paused in silence, but the police presence was a far cry from earlier protests, and the Humvees and riot gear that accompanied demonstrators just a week ago were absent Monday night. So this is a lot of words that aren't used a lot when people talk to each other in English. So we're going to slowly go through and talk about each of them. So when somebody says the word episode, they can mean an episode of a show. Like you could say, "Oh, did you see that episode of my favorite TV show last night?" That's what an episode is. But an episode can also be, it's a period of time where something happens. It's a certain time when something happened. That's what you can call an episode. Like, people use it to describe, like, I have a friend who is bipolar, meaning she can get really angry sometimes, and sometimes it's not because she's really angry. That's just how her brain works. Or she'll be really sad, and with the way she talks about it, she could say, "Oh, yesterday I had such a bad episode," meaning it was this time that something specific happened. So that's what they call episode. So when they talk about the latest episode, meaning the most recent or the one that just happened, the thing that just happened, that was a specific thing in a period of time, meaning at a certain time, meaning a protest. So that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the protests. Nationwide means, it's one of those words in English that sounds like what it is. It's meaning through the whole nation. Nation means country. It just means the country that you're in. And wide means, from one side to the other, there was something happening. That's what nationwide means. So the protests are happening nationwide and across the Beehive State. When somebody says Beehive State, that's what people call Utah sometimes. Utah has a nickname. Nickname means it's like a name that isn't the real name, but it's the name that people will call it, is the Beehive State. So if you hear somebody, that's why you kind of see like a lot of like beehive stuff around Utah in the art or statues and things like that. It's why it's on the flag is we call it, people call it the Beehive State. So that's what it means. It just means Utah. So this whole group of words right here, it says that there was almost 500 people who were marching down the street in Salt Lake City in protest similar to the ones that have happened around the country, around the United States, and around Utah. The demonstrations, so when it says demonstrations, it means a demonstration is to show something. So that's what a demonstration is. Have decried police brutality. So this group of words right here. So decried means to call out or to it's talking about it, how it's bad, or bringing up something, saying, look at this isn't good. Police brutality is like when somebody is really violent, when somebody is really mean. That's what brutality is, or brutal. And when it says police brutality, it's talking about police being really violent, either killing people or hurting them when they don't need to. It's over the top. They don't need to do it. And the deaths of George Floyd in Minnesota. Minnesota is a state in the United States, just kind of like how Utah is. Minnesota is another one of the states in the United States. Breonna Taylor in Kentucky. Kentucky is a state. And Bernardo Palacios Carbajal in Salt Lake City. So that's in Salt Lake City. That's a city, not a state. The crowd chanted. The word chanted is a verb, and the main verb, the simple present, is chant. So this is past tense, chanted. But chant means when a lot of people say the same thing at the same time over and over again. That's what a chant is. So when it says that they chanted, and then it has these little lines around it right here. These are called quotation marks, like we've learned before. It just means anything that's in between these lines. It means these are the words that people said. So this is what they were chanting. So democracy, the word democracy is a word that you hear a lot in the United States, And democracy is when it's an organization of people that all have a vote or a say in what is happening with the government or anything that happens that's decided for the group. When a law is made, those sorts of things. So that's what people mean when they say democracy. It means that they are participating or they are talking about and working with rules that are being made. This is what democracy looks like, and Black Lives Matter before kneeling for several minutes at each intersection. Intersection here means just in the streets when it's when you have two roads that cross each other. That's what an intersection is. Blocking traffic both ways. A caravan is any group that are following each other and they're traveling. In this case, it's a caravan of honking cars, meaning there was a line of cars that were honking that followed the protesters, with passengers leaning out of windows, waving signs and holding their fists in the air. So that means there was a line of cars that were doing this. The crowd erupted. So erupt is the simple present form of the verb, erupt. So you'll see that it's past tense, erupted. So erupt means to do something all of a sudden and very quickly. So you could say a volcano erupts. That's when the mountains that have the fire and the rocks that come out the top, you say it erupted or it erupts. It means that something happens all of a sudden. So when it says the crowd erupted, it means that people suddenly started cheering and they started making noise all of a sudden, really quickly. As a particularly enthusiastic means excited. Like, it means not necessarily that they're happy, but they are excited and they have a lot of energy. Enthusiastic Utah Transit Authority. Utah Transit Authority, that's UTA. That's the company that drives the buses and the tracks and stuff. So transit is to move, and authority is like the person that's in charge, the people that are in charge. Bus driver passed laying on the horn. So this sentence right here, so this verb lay, they've written it as the present continuous, laying. So lay, means that like when you lay down, it means that you put your body like down. That's what laying is. When somebody says laying on the horn, in English, it just means that they were holding the horn on the car or the bus or the truck down. It means that they were holding it down for a long time. So that's what laying on the horn means. And pumping her fist through the window. Police escorted. So the word escorted. Escorted means to take somebody and help them go another place. So when you say that there's an escort, it means that it's somebody that is there to help you get to another place. So it says that the police escorted, meaning they followed the protesters as they walked through downtown Salt Lake, blocking off each intersection. We know what that word is. It's the two roads that cross each other at the stoplights, as the protesters paused in silence, meaning the police were blocking off the intersections so no cars could come through as the protesters were walking. But the police presence means when somebody or something is there. That's what presence means. Was a far cry. Far cry in English, we use that word to describe when it's exactly the opposite or it's really different from. meaning the police that were at the protests last week were very different in the way they were acting from the police that were at the protests this week. Earlier protests and the Humvees. Humvees are the cars that are really, really big that the military uses, like the army uses. The National Guard uses them. They're the really big cars that look kind of like Jeeps, but they have really big tires and they have a lot of space in the back, or in the back of the car. So that's what a Humvee is. And riot gear. Riot gear, you've probably seen a lot of pictures of this in the news, or may have seen it in real life. Riot gear is when the police have those, like, the big clear shield things on their arms. A shield is like, it's something that blocks people or like protects people. So it's when the police have those big clear plastic things in front of them, and they have goggles on and helmets on, and they have these really thick like suits on. That's what riot gear is. That accompany means that was with. Accompanied is like when you're with somebody. So that means that all of this stuff, the Humvees and the riot gear, were there when the demonstrators is another word for the protesters, just a week ago were absent Monday night, meaning absent means not there. That's what absent means. So that was a lot of words that are kind of confusing, but if you have any more questions about this, just let me know. That was a lot of reading, so good job if you've made it all the way to the end, and just let me know if you have any questions.